I am so excited to have you here and to have our panelists here to discuss what it's like to teach with Econiful. The bulk of our time is going to be spent hearing from our panelists, and then I'm going to hold 5 to 8 minutes at the end so that you all can ask them the questions that you're wondering about. I'm going to give you a moment to review our learning objectives, and I'm going to spotlight our panelists so that you all can see them. And I'll work on that once we get things going. So my hope here is you're going to leave with real strategies from teachers who've already incorporated our lessons into their classrooms, and then get a clearer sense of how Econiful can fit into your own classroom. And we'll return to these learning objectives, of course, at the end. But to give you a little bit of context before I turn it over to our panelists, if you're new to Econiful, first and foremost, welcome. Over the last 3 years, we've built a full 1-semester on-level high school economics course, which is made up of these 5 units. And our goal with this curriculum is to help students apply economic thinking to their everyday lives and give teachers really clear, ready-to-use materials, whether you're teaching it for the first time or you're refining a course that you've taught for years. And when you access these lessons, you'll notice that they aren't heavy on computation or graphs. Instead, they focus on that real-world application, discussion, and decision-making. So all the lessons you'll hear about today are available for members at no monetary cost on our website. Not free, right? That's a 4-letter F word that we don't use, but no monetary cost. So as you can see, today's panelists represent a wide range of geographic locations, as well as adoptions of our lessons and familiarity with teaching economics. And we were really intentional with creating this panel because we wanted to have a mix of newer and veteran econ educators so that you can hear what this looks like at different points in your teaching journey, and then have that ability to bring it into your course. And I do want to protect as much time as possible for hearing from our panelists. So I'm going to have Mikkel put a link in the chat to a slide that has some additional information about each of our panelists. So there you can learn more about what they teach, their accomplishments, and their commitment to their craft in the slide notes. I would have loved to go into that, but we would spend our whole time together with me telling you how wonderful these educators are, and that is not why you're here. You're here to hear directly from them. So we're going to start out with a quick question for everybody on the panel. Then we're going to pivot to our newer teachers, then our veteran econ teachers. And when I say newer, it's newer to economics. And then we'll have time for your questions from the audience. So please feel free to drop those questions into the chat whenever they come up. And with that, let's jump into it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to make sure we've got all our panelists spotlighted. So thanks for bearing with me for one moment while I do that. Getting close. And okay, we've got our 6 panelists. So with that, in a sentence or two, panelists, can you each share a memorable student reaction from your economics class? Maybe this is an aha moment. Maybe it's a time a student connected something from class to their real life. And we're going to start out just with the order you appear on my screen. So we'll start out with Robin.
Yeah. There we go. I was going to say I needed to unmute. I think a thing that stands out to me is as the course went on, just how they recognized economics was about choices. And one of the specific just activities was Tragedy of the Commons, and I did the log activity and how much that stood out to them. So that's just the first thing that kind of came to my mind as the logs and the pretzels just kind of came to mind as you asked that question.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that's lesson 210. I'm going to put that in the chat just so that I can keep track of what lessons we talk about today, which might be helpful for you later. And then Beth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'm going to give one from the beginning. I did the raft lesson as my first lesson, and it was really great because the kids had to think about like what they would do. So that whole idea of scarcity and having to make choices was like new to them. They hadn't at my school, this was the first time that they've taken economics. So it was new to them. And it was really great to see their engagement and they're really thinking about it and being frustrated that like, wait a minute, like I can't have everything I want and I can't make the choices and how they're going to make those decisions. And I think that was like a really great way to start the year.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Alicia, can you share in a sentence or two a memorable student reaction from your class?
Yeah, what first came to mind for me was the coffee market. I think it's 2.1. My kids, they're just coming off their first unit and they've got their first real, formal assessment, the summative assessment feedback. And then it's starting with this very interactive activity where you have kids that are super engaged that want to, be the one who's selling the most or buying the most. And it just really, or the kids who are quiet that, find somebody who just they can talk to and exchange coffee and realizing that just because you want to sell it doesn't mean somebody wants to buy it at that price. And so it really was an aha moment of, and I say economics is a social science. It's big words on everyday things. So when we bring supply and demand to things that they do every day, it really is an aha moment for them.
Thank you so much. I love that. All right, we'll hand it over to Erica.
So I'm going to go a little bit, not like a specific moment, but one of my really big things is I had a kid who graduated and said that he could not stop thinking about economics after my class. And he actually ended up changing his major to economics in college and came back, brought me Chick-fil-A to let me know that he's like, recreational economics wasn't enough. I had to do the real thing. And I know that a lot of that is because I was able to make the class engaging and fun with a lot of these lessons from economy.
Thank you so much. And Chick-fil-A. All right. Melissa, we're going to hand it over to you.
Okay, so the first lesson that I actually tried with Econiful was the diminishing marginal utility. And my students at first were like, what? You're letting us chew gum? But then like having them chew gum and to see how their satisfaction kind of diminished over time. And then it like gave them scenarios at the end that tied like that used economic principles. So it was like using like cost benefit analysis and interdependence and opportunity cost and like marginal principle. So it really kind of started getting my students to see like economics is real world situation that it applies to their life on a daily basis. So I think that kind of helped me to hook them.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then last but not least, Taylor.
I think the most memorable was just seeing how a lot of the material continued to snowball one after the other. Kind of near the end of Unit 5, we were working on budgeting, and I can hear the conversations that my students are having between what would the opportunity cost be if I chose this versus that, or oh, interdependence principle. What if this were to happen in the economy? How is that going to affect what we're doing right now? So for them to be so receptive of the material that we were working through for a semester, and then just being able to hash it out with each other and then put it on paper what their plans are and all those other contingencies that go with them.
Excellent. I really love hearing these aha moments, these like things that stick out for you all. Because I know as an educator, I definitely had those moments, and those are like the little things we put in our pockets for having a not so great day. And so I hope that fills your cup as you're heading into the new school year. I now want to shift over to those of you who are newer to teaching economics. Um, First, if you could just give us a little bit of context of how long you've been teaching economics so that we have an idea of everybody's timeline. And then I'd love to hear for those of you who are a bit newer to it, if a teacher's opening their very first Econiful lesson tomorrow, what's one thing that you'd tell them to do or not do to make sure that they're successful with that? And I think we're going to start out this time with Beth.
This was only my first year teaching, and I didn't find out that I was teaching economics until the last day of school. And I hadn't taken economics since college. So you can look and you can see that was a long time ago. So I can't even tell you like what a lifesaver Econiful has been for me. Like going to like first of all, like you can find out about the different events that they have so you can join. And it really felt like every time like I was at a place in my curriculum, like, what am I going to do? Like there would be an Econiful on it and I could sign up and I could like learn about the different activities. And so I would say first thing is like read through everything, make a copy of the slideshow, and then you can adjust like everything they give you. They literally give you everything. So you can change anything that you want, but first time through, like I would just follow it. They have at the bottom of the slides the notes to explain like this is what you might hear. So they fill in everything you will need. And so you can just feel like just such relief that you can, it's like a plug and play, like you can just take it and just go with it, and your kids will enjoy it, and you will have the answers that you need and the information you need, and it looks beautiful and it follows great pedagogy. So, highly recommend.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Robin, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, Robin, you'll need to unmute yourself.
I'm jealous of everybody that's getting this today, because I found you guys, I think maybe a week before the school year started. And I was like, oh my gosh, I saw everything that was there. And I was panicking kind of all summer of not knowing what I was going to do. Long-time AP Psych and Psych teacher, have never taught econ. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, I bought things on Teacher Pay Teacher. Like, I was just divulging into so much content that I didn't know where to go. And then I landed upon Econiful, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is all that I needed. Truly, this is all that I needed. And it really took my, I was actually going to a new school as well. I mean, anything that could be new was happening last year. So just the way that the course was set up, as Beth just said, the slides, the directions, even for some things, there was like video clips, the professional development, but I was able to kind of, do my seating chart, figure out what's happening for a day or two. But it literally just, the stress was kind of like, I know where I can kind of go with this and where I can have resources. But, the things for the students, like every single thing I needed, I cannot stress it enough. It was all that I needed. I did not use anything else really last year other than what I modified with the Econiful content. But I mean, that is what I use. I did not use my Teacher Pay Teacher. I did not use any of that because it was so organized in terms of what I needed as somebody coming in new to this content, even though I've been a longtime teacher. As you said, ready to use, I wrote that down. And kind of last thing for me is, having taught courses before like AP Psychology, that the curriculum's outlined for me. Like, I know exactly what I need to do, what I need to cover. There's so much material in economics. It's like, where do I go? So, teaching it again going forward, maybe I'll add in some different things. But for the first year, I can't even express enough my thank you to Econiful, the content, how it was set up, the collaboration from Econiful. It was a game changer for me and my students.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And I'm so impressed with everybody and anybody who gets assigned something like last minute, or, like end of school year is last minute in my mind. I need a lot of prep time. And for people to power through and come up with solutions, like, pats on the back to everybody. So lastly, Taylor, I'd love to hear from you. So if we are about to open up our first Econiful lesson tomorrow, what should we do?
My recommendation is, as you're going through the content, try to come up with personal anecdotes that you can share with the students. This was my first year teaching econ. I haven't touched econ since 2012. Shout out to Jay in the chat who said he had to learn while teaching it, and that was kind of my situation too. But I found out that coming up with anecdotes, my personal experiences, it made me more confident to teach that to the students. And then I also encourage my students, hey, come up with your own personal anecdotes so you can make this stick and make it make sense for you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I want to pause on something really practical that we've kind of touched on a little bit with some of those responses, and that's lesson prep. So Robin, can you walk us through what that actually looks like during your planning period or the night before? We've all been there. Before you're teaching an Econiful lesson, what are you doing?
Well, just because the site is set up so well, I definitely would kind of look at the unit, and I'm always kind of like, really, I do kind of back into it. Like, when do I think I realistically could test on this? So that kind of helped me pick. I didn't do all the lessons kind of in a unit, but what are the ones that make the most sense? I know it was mentioned starting with the coffee one. All right, what am I going to do with kind of supply and demand? But it was looking like how they built upon each other. So I would kind of look at a calendar and kind of plug in dates of what I think I would kind of do. Maybe I want a day longer, a day shorter. But that was kind of seeing, and I used a lot of AI. I used a lot of chat. It was kind of my sidekick last year of like, all right, this is what I'm kind of thinking just for somebody else, something else to bounce it off of that, because I was the only person teaching it. So I was kind of my own island outside of Econiful. So for me, it was really just that, like, what are all the lessons in there? What are the topics? Maybe I have 2.5 weeks. Maybe you have more lessons in there. Which ones build on each other the best? And as Taylor said, I could not agree more of how do I connect this back to myself, for them, just the psychology teacher in me, like that was so easy to do, but it was easy for economics as well, as just making those connections. So going back to kind of your question, it really was looking at how many days I kind of wanted to kind of go with something. Because I think we all know as teachers, something, oh, I'm going to spend a week on this. It could be 3 weeks. I try to give myself a little bit of a framework so that I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to do this, this in a day. I'm going to do this. I'm going to let this take 2 days. Because I have an interesting kind of schedule. Some other people might have this. I have a modified block. So I have like 3 days that are a normal 45 and one day that was longer. So I'd always make sure that I was trying to put together an activity or doing review activities then. But yeah, looking at a calendar, how many days do I think I want to kind of take here, and looking what lessons that you guys had set up for it, and kind of working around it that way.
Excellent. And then Beth, let's head over to you with your lesson prep. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, my class, it was AP Micro Macro, was what I had to teach. And so I had to look at it a little bit differently because I had to follow sort of the framework of the AP curriculum and trying to see which pieces fit in. And I really felt like the material really made it accessible to the kids. And so it was like, okay, like here we are. And I found out later on, which I did not know in the beginning, that you have a map that links, these lessons would go great with these units in AP, which I didn't know at first. So I do recommend people use that map because that's like incredibly helpful. And so I was like manually like, okay, like what's coming up? Like, what do I need to cover? So that was a lot of my prep. But I also would look at to see like sometimes like with the different market games, like what I needed to copy for the kids, like, what resources I would need, like, is this something that would be great on cardstock so I can use it again and I don't have to do this again and again. So I did look at those types of preps as well. So that was sort of like how I would handle. And I also utilize like, again, going to as many sessions as I could and asking questions because I have to say, like, guess what? Econiful people reply to you and they'll answer your questions. And so it's very like the support network that you put in place is wonderful. So I'd like to add that in.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We love getting questions. It's honestly, it's my favorite thing when I open up my email and see a question from a teacher and I'm like, I'm helping. So anytime you have questions, reach out. All right, Taylor, what was your planning period like when you're getting ready to teach an Econiful lesson?
My planning period was pretty much just go over the lesson plan. I'd go over the content. I'd definitely keep an eye out for those stumbling blocks because usually I would get stumbled, and I knew if I got stumbled, I'd be difficult to clarify that for the students. So once I got those clarified, just get the materials ready to go, and then just kind of take off from there. So Econiful made the lesson and getting all the prep much more streamlined for me.
Excellent. And just to expand on the stumbling blocks, if you haven't taken a look at some of our lessons, we identify like the most likely areas of confusion for students, like changes in supply versus changes in quantity supplied. And we have a little graphic of a stumble. So that's what Taylor's mentioning there, is to be on the lookout for those. Excellent. So then We're going to shift a little bit here. Alicia, from your perspective as someone who's been teaching econ for a little bit, and if you could share how long that bit has been, how does the prep that we just heard about compare to how you prepare for Econiful lessons when you're using them?
I think I've just wrapped up year 19. I'm trying to remember. It's all lost at this point. But I've been teaching econ now, oh gosh, since 2014, like on the regular. So it's been a while. And but like what they described is everything I do too. The one thing I think Taylor mentioned this to begin with is making it your own. The first lesson out of the gate was about a rafting trip down. You're going like on a 2-week rafting trip, and I'm in Indiana, and like there's no rafting like that happening here. And my kids were very confused why we would do that. And so it was much more, I had to adapt the lesson to like, we're going to go backpacking on the Appalachian Trail. And then they're like, oh, and it made much more sense than like what, like geographically for them. And so definitely make sure that your kids are going to catch that. Like, that's like the only one I can think of off the top of my head that was like stuck out. And then, like I said, I print a lot of the things in color. If you have access to a color copier, like there's different graphs like over the GDP lesson, maybe the income inequality one as well. They look good in color. They do not look good in black and white. And recognizing that ahead of time, you could sit there with colored pencils and have like go through, try to do it that way if you don't have access to it. But that's time consuming. And knowing that, like, you can't do that at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you've got to be aware of those little things that make a huge difference on outcomes, because that GDP lesson is one of my favorites that the kids really get into, to recognize that like it's a measure. It's not perfect, but it's what we use. It's, it is a measurement of standard of living. And but if it's black and white and you're looking at 5 different countries, and they all look the same in grayscale, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So definitely make sure that if you don't have access to that you're printing ahead of time and then taking the time with different color markers to fix that. Trying to think of other things. The stumbling block was a great one, but I mean, whether you're doing it as a first year or 20 years, it's the same. And like the content, like I feel like I've got a mastery of the content at this point, enough that doesn't stumble me as much as just making sure. I teach, I think, 7 different classes. I'm at a small rural school. I teach US history, Indiana studies, personal finance, econ, AP, micro, macro, sociology, US history. So I don't have a lot of time to process all of that, but processing every morning, like, here's what I'm going to do today. It has to be very much well planned, well thought out ahead of time, especially with those resources.
Thank you, Alicia. And 7 preps. Wow. Kudos. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from those of you who've been teaching econ for several years. And if you could tell us how long you've been teaching econ, so we've got that context. And we'll start out with Erica. Compared to other materials that you've used to teach economics, how do your students respond to Econiful lessons? Like, what feels different for you?
So I've been teaching econ. This is my 18th. I just finished my 18th year, and I've taught at least one section of econ every single year. For me, one of the big priorities me and my other econ teachers at my school really wanted to make is to try to do at least one hands-on activity with each of our units, either at the beginning or the end. And there's not a whole, like there is, but there's not a whole bunch out there for econ stuff. And even though I teach in Georgia, I'm able to find activities that are really ready to go, on the Econiful website, like the Starburst activity or, the raft activity. And they're really good and well thought out. And I will say, like, if you have an issue, the Econiful crew they're amazing at actually coming back and, like taking your feedback seriously. Like, I actually told them with the Starburst activity, I was like, hey, this was an issue in one of my classes. Here's how I changed the Google Doc to make it better. And I think they actually changed it forever on that.
We did.
Yeah. And I was like, we had a little roadblock and here you go. And so, like, it's just really great. And like I said, the Econiful people, one of the great things about this stuff is if you are truly looking through the lesson and you're like, I'm not it's not making sense. If you reach out, like they have that, like they're going to be fairly response, really quickly. And it's really well made stuff. Like I love that it's a Google Doc so that I can make a copy, I can edit it how I need to. It's just great. And you don't get that in a lot of the stuff. Like I have a lot of the old workbooks and they're very dated.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, thank you for your feedback on 4.8. Those are forever changes. Absolutely. So Melissa, let's head over to you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how long you've taught, as well as how these materials compare to other materials that you've used for teaching econ.
Okay. This is starting year 30. So we start, like, the state of Nevada really didn't make economics like mandatory until 2021, but I started it in like 2017. And when I first started, there was no materials. I was struggling. I didn't really remember the content because I hadn't had it since college, kind of like all of you. And then I discovered Econiful. And I don't even remember how I discovered it, but once I discovered it, it was like a game changer because I feel that it's very interactive. The students really do like, they find it engaging, they find it interesting. So even lessons that I had been doing previously, like I've kind of like pushed those aside to start these, especially like the financial literacy lessons that you guys have just done. I pretty much almost canned my curriculum that I had previously, and I've just been using the Econiful lessons because I feel like, they flow in order. They're everything really that the students need to know. And so I feel like it's a game changer because not only does it have the lesson plan, it has all the activities, it has answer keys that are easily explained. It has like different options. It's got like Google Docs where you can make it your own. And I would highly suggest that for, teachers that are just starting to use this curriculum, I like I kind of like jazz up some of the PowerPoints or whatever just to make it mine. So that I can't say enough. I love this curriculum. And I was like, thank goodness I discovered it 3 years ago.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that we keep hearing this theme of make it your own because I'm such a big proponent of it. Like, your kids better than I'll ever know them, unfortunately. I don't get to meet them. So make it fit the context you're in. I love that. So thank you all for bringing that up so many different times. I want to keep with that same question and we'll move to Erica. Wait, I'm out of order. Just kidding. Alicia, I'm so sorry. Compared to the other materials you've used to teach econ, how have your students responded to Econiful lessons?
I'm trying to like think life before Econiful. It's been a few years. I found you guys a long time ago, it feels like now. Yeah, I mean, like I did a similar, like if you guys know Jacob Clifford, I think everybody in econ should know Jacob Clifford. If you don't, he did a pearl exchange instead of the coffee market. And I like that activity and kudos to Jacob for that. But I like Econiful's better because they're holding tangible cards and like there's it just that it gives it that edge that the pearl exchange needed was that when you're doing they tells you a dollar value on the card rather than me giving a blanket price value to everyone there. And I really liked that. And then we built a graph based upon their supply and demand. And then the production possibilities frontier, I had that a note to make a couple remarks about that. If you have not done the pandas and tigers activity for production possibilities frontiers, you are missing out. I had one I found from some professors from a university about you just give a kid a piece of paper, and they can either make a fan, like a paper fan, or a paper hat. And that really was very quick, but the kids love decorating, and I even give them color pencils and they make the most beautiful tigers. And I take those little bookmarks that you make through that and I make a production possibilities frontier, putting pandas on the Y and tigers on the X on my back wall. And so then we reference that graph every unit that we're doing. And then it really gives them connection. And so like it takes what I had been doing to a level where it makes it beautiful. Like you guys have beautiful graphics, but like the products that they're creating, I can't say enough about the fact that like It is. It's just that edge that you need, especially I can imagine as a new teacher. I'm super happy that you're out there for new teachers because I needed this 15 years ago because it was everything we needed. So yeah.
Thank you. All right. Before we open it up to questions from the audience, and a lot of you have mentioned different lessons, so I'm going to maybe ask a challenging question for you. I would love to hear from each of you in just a sentence or two. If you're like, this is the one, what is your favorite Econiful lesson and why does it stand out to you? And Erica's going to just shimmy out of her seat if I don't call on her. So, Erica, we'll start with you.
The federal funds lesson is a masterpiece because I'm not going to lie, even before I did it, I was like, I think I kind of understand the federal fund rate, but it's magnificent. If you have a document camera, I would suggest trying to do that with the document camera and you go along with it. But it is the single greatest thing that's come out of Econiful. I'm not going to lie. I think my reviews on there, and it's something about I heard the angels sing. It is true.
And which part of that lesson? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the part where like you're looking at the unemployment rate and the interest rates, and you're trying to decide like what are they going to do and how is that going to impact it, and you see that it's kind of like circular. But that part of that worksheet slash Google slide, like the answers are in the Google slide, but I found it a little bit more meaningful when I actually used my document camera and like went along with them. And I was like, oh, I don't know, guys. Do we think that's going to work? And they were like, oh, you're right. But that is the best part of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go in order that you appear on my screen. So that means, Taylor, you're in the hot seat.
This is such a tough one for me. I would say, honestly, top two would have to be why credit score matters and then why is trade so sweet, just because they're so versatile. You could plop them into other content areas. I'm going to do that for my AP World this year with trade and introing the Columbian Exchange. But going back to credit scores, just like the unintended consequences, students were like rioting almost at some points because they're like, what? This can tank my score. And then there was another, I remember the card. It was your younger sibling asks you to make you an authorized user on their credit card. What do you do? And I had a student pull me aside and they're like, Mr. Waterworth, I put my friend on my credit card as an authorized user. Was that a good idea? And I was like, we don't have enough time to unpack that question, but so just seeing them in real time, making those connections and the consequence that go with it, it's just been a great, great resource.
It sounds like they knew the answer to that question. Is it a good idea? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. We're going to continue on. Melissa.
I really enjoyed like the budgeting ones. Like when I started getting into financial literacy, I feel like my students really kind of like I work at like more like a trade type school. And so my students, and I started off with making informed career decisions. So then they got to see how much money they actually were going to have. And then once I went through that whole lesson of they got certain money, it was like really interesting to see like the choices that they made and how it really kind of put it full circle, and it brought back to like different economic principles. So I really enjoyed that, and I think my students enjoyed it really well too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Alicia.
Well, I've already mentioned the pandas and tigers, and I think one of the other things I would add to that is I have a homeroom, like an SRT, and I had them also make pandas and tigers because they got their homework done. And the next day I said we had contracted out new laborers and we added to it. And that took it. And then I put those up on the board that they already had, I made out of their pandas and tigers. And then it shifted the curve. And the kids were like it just was a visual display that they needed and that they loved. The other one, if you've not used the income inequality one, I don't remember what one that is, but it's where you had the beans and it's like the quintiles, and trying to explain the Gini coefficient to kids is like trying to explain rocket science. They have no idea, but you make it in a way that we split it up. Like, how do you think that income is distributed in the United States? And then they have to put the beans in the spaces. I will tell you, I didn't use beans this year because my kids drop the beans a lot. And so instead I laminated it and I just had them use a dry erase marker and put dots there instead. It saved the custodians from wanting to punch me in the face. And
Always a good thing.
yes, that I mean, I usually have something on the, whether it's paper from making paper hats, whatever it is, it's, but that one is, it was I have to say, when you talk about Erica's talking about the federal funds one, that one to me, I had taught that a million different ways, but that having them distribute it and distributing the beans into different quintiles gave them that visual that they needed to take it to that next level.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm glad that you've come up with a solution that works better for your space. Robin, we'll head over to you.
Yeah, agree with Taylor. Trade is sweet. I had written that one down. There's another trade one with cards that was very good. But two that just stood out to me as they were talking was, really big on hands-on ones. So like I liked all the activities are, but the pattern puzzles on Monopoly. So somebody else had mentioned, the market systems, but like having to make sure you use card stock. It took a while to, get those all kind of ready. But the students, it really let me know how much they understood, monopolies, oligopolies. So that was a really good review activity. And then I also wanted to mention hats and firms. That was a nice one to kind of add in to just kind of change things up. You could do that one almost anywhere. And then I added the second semester when I taught it, I did some different incentives, like for 3 more minutes, can you have your hat on your head and I'll give you another, so much money. So just finding ways, to make it work for me, but incentives are a real thing in the world. So the hats and firms was another fan favorite.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll close out with Beth for this question.
So I'm going to say that in the end, because all these other ones already talked about. So I'm going to say the whole personal finance unit, I was dealing, again, I did AP. And so once they took their AP test and before they left for college, like it felt so good for me to give them this information before they went off to school. And they really loved it. And we got into really rich discussions about different types, like going through their paychecks, like the perils, the positives and perils. I'm trying to think of the exact name, promise and peril of compound interest, like all of those pieces, the insurance, like all of it, like it's stuff that they haven't sat down at the table and discussed with their families, like they don't know. And it was really eye-opening for them. And it just felt so meaningful. And the discussions that they would get into, and like, oh, well, just knowing about like states, like how it says that they're, tax-free in certain areas, but where are they getting their money from? So it's not just, so it was just gave them these insights that they didn't have before. And so you could just feel good that you're preparing your students for when they step out into the world when you do those personal finance.
Awesome. Thank you all so, so much for sharing these insights. I really appreciate it. And I'm very impressed with your recall of all of these different lessons on top of everything else on your mind. So let's turn it over to our audience. I would love to hear what questions you have for our panelists. If there's a specific panelist you'd like to hear from, please feel free to include that when you put the question in the chat. And then I'll pose them to our panelists. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see those instructions there. Here we go. And we do have one question to start us off. So Jay was asking, what are some effective ways to prepare hands-on simulations before class so that you don't get off guard when teaching it for the first time? So Jay mentioned, like, yes, you could run through with friends and family, and I've absolutely done that. But have you found better, different, more effective ways to prepare for hands-on simulations? Erica is ready to go. Okay. She's unmuting. She's working on it.
I accidentally clicked in the chat, so when I was holding down my space bar, it was just spacing. My bad. But for me, one of the big things is like I try to like actually physically get up and walk through it, like with the coffee market simulation. It tells you all the items that you need, all your materials, right? And you can always bribe a kid with candy to cut them out for you, just saying. And so, but like I would physically walk through it because I found out before I even ran through it, I was like, oh, I need my marketplace to be much further away than where I needed to be. Like I needed to have moved desks so that I had a bigger market, things like that. And I don't think I would have realized that had I not actually physically kind of walked through it. And so that's one of the big things. And then also be ready for chaos and like know that it's not probably going to go exactly smooth the first time. It never does. And as long as you got that, you should be good. Like I said, I like to physically kind of walk through it. Like I said, if I can have a kid or a coworker help me with it, but if not, like you can kind of get a gist for how it's going to roll just by reading through it and kind of walking through it.
Thank you. And then Jacqueline had a question for one of our veteran teachers. Can you share a piece of advice for newer to econ teachers that you found works really well with your classes that you wish you'd known when you first started teaching? All right, Alicia's ready to go.
And one of the things that's worked well for my classrooms, especially using the Econiful curriculum, is identifying, I think I said this before, one other things we've talked about with Kathleen, but identifying somebody in the class that they can quickly turn and talk to. So not like that they're like I have individual desks in my room, but I just identify, like find somebody near you and then point to that person. And then I have them say something like, all right, whoever drove the furthest to get to school today, whoever woke up earlier today, and then they answer those first questions, the activator questions together. But then the one who, has longer hair goes first. Identify them right out of the gate so that somebody has to talk out of, right out of the gate. First things first, they're like measuring their hair or they're talking about, I say like, who's got bigger shoe size, smaller shoe size, something like that to get them talking to one another. And then that person owns the question and answers it. And then the other person has to respond. But I have one person always, and then like find if it's an extra, I'm like, all right, you're not a duo, you're a trio today. And so it's a very quick turn and talk for the kids after like the first day or two in that raft activity, they've already kind of merged into groups. I don't let them choose seats. I'm much more of a like neat and tight. Like I'm not, I don't know. I'm not one of I have to have assigned
You
seats.
like order. It's okay.
Yes, I
Don't be
know.
ashamed.
It is. I have to have order. And so I have assigned seats, but I always ask them on like day one after the raft activity to on their paper to write down one person in the room that they would feel comfortable talking to because we are going to talk. And then if that person, the next day when they come in and their seat is assigned in that new seat, I say, this is trust. If you cannot, sit there and, listen, then we'll find a new place for you. But that seems to have worked over the last 20 years of teaching is that they have that one person that they can talk to, that they can lean on for support, and that they feel comfortable so that they can actually dive into the content.
Excellent. Thank you. And then we're going to turn to Robin. I think you had something to add or something different.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, I change seats quite often, and that helps a lot too, just for them to getting to know each other in the classroom. But being new to econ or whatever you're kind of teaching, I think it too is, taking like a breath during class and being like, all right, let me put 3 things on the board, or I'll have a slide in there to be like, I will literally say, all right, Kathleen and Alicia, you two turn and talk. Like there's a big thing when you use their name, like it feels very direct. It really has worked well. So saying like, all right, review these 3 terms. How much do you guys understand this with supply and demand, or what's going to kind of happen? But it gives you kind of a breath. It, just like because you're going at full speed and like all this content. But I did that in psych. I'm like, why don't I do this in economics? And that is just it. Like, even if you're not planning on it, be like, you know what? I've given them so much information. I feel like they've zoned out. Let me take a break right now and ask them to go over these 2 terms. But as Alicia was saying, like really being specific about who they're partnering with really makes a big difference. And again, very big on like get to know their names as soon as possible. But when you call them out, I don't know why it works extremely well.
It sure does. You say my name in a PD and I'm going to be
Yes.
right there. So I'm
Yes.
going to have to pause it here. I could listen to you all day, every day. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the questions that you've all contributed and our panelists for being here today and sharing their experiences.